Let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. Right now, at this very moment, are you absolutely certain that the financial decisions you made last year were the right ones? Because here is the truth nobody wants to hear. We are standing at the edge of one of the most significant economic shifts in modern history, and most people have no idea what is coming. You see, I have spent decades studying economic cycles, patterns that repeat themselves throughout history like clockwork, and what I am seeing right now keeps me awake at night. Not because I am worried about my own wealth, but because I know that millions of hardworking people are about to make the biggest financial mistake of their lives. They are about to buy homes in states that are financially drowning, and they do not even realize it. Think about it this way. Imagine you are standing on a beach, enjoying the sunshine, building sandcastles with your family. Everything seems perfect. But what you do not see is that far out in the ocean, there is a massive wave forming, a tsunami of debt that is heading straight toward the shore. By the time most people notice it, it will be too late to run. That tsunami is real, and it is made of state debt, unfunded pensions, and broken promises. And in 2026, it is going to crash into 5 specific states harder than anywhere else in the country. Now, before you think this is just another doom and gloom prediction, let me be clear. I am not here to scare you. I am here to prepare you, because the wealthy do not panic during economic shifts. They position themselves. They understand something that most people never learn. Every crisis is simply a redistribution of wealth from those who do not see it coming to those who do. So let me take you back to a conversation I had many years ago with a mentor of mine. We were sitting in his office overlooking the city, and I asked him a simple question. How do you know when to buy and when to sell? He smiled and said something I will never forget. He told me that markets are like seasons. Winter always follows autumn. Spring always follows winter. The people who get rich are not the ones who try to stop winter from coming. They are the ones who prepare for it while everyone else is still enjoying the autumn sunshine. Right now, we are in that autumn phase. The leaves are still on the trees. The sun is still shining in many places. But if you know how to read the signs, you can see winter approaching. And those 5 states I mentioned, they are about to experience the coldest winter in generations. Here is what most people get wrong about real estate. They think that buying a home is always a good investment. They have been told their whole lives that you cannot go wrong with property. But that advice is dangerously outdated. A house is only a good investment if the economic foundation beneath it is solid. And right now, in these 5 states, that foundation has more cracks than a frozen lake in spring. Let me explain this with a simple principle. Every state operates like a business. It has income through taxes. It has expenses through services, infrastructure, and salaries. And some states have made promises, massive promises to their employees about pensions and benefits. The problem is that many of these states made these promises when times were good, when tax revenues were flowing in, when everything seemed endless. But nothing is endless. And now those chickens are coming home to roost. When a state has more obligations than it can possibly pay, something has to give. And what gives is always the same thing. Services get cut, infrastructure crumbles, crime rises because police forces shrink, schools deteriorate, property values collapse, and the people who bought homes thinking they were making a safe investment suddenly find themselves trapped in a financial nightmare they never saw coming. I want you to imagine 2 families, both hardworking, both responsible, both following conventional wisdom. Family A buys a beautiful home in one of these 5 states in early 2026. They get a great mortgage rate. The neighborhood looks perfect. Their kids will go to good schools. On paper, everything checks out. Family B does their homework. They study the state finances. They look at the pension obligations, the tax base, the population trends. They see warning signs everywhere. So instead, they rent for another year, even though everyone tells them they are throwing money away. They wait, they watch, they prepare. Fast forward 3 years. Family A is underwater on their mortgage. Their property value has dropped 30%. Their property taxes have doubled to cover the state debt. The schools have cut programs. The roads are full of potholes. And they cannot sell because nobody wants to buy in their state anymore. They are trapped. Family B just bought their dream home in a financially stable state for 40% less than they would have paid 3 years earlier. They positioned themselves. They were patient. They understood the cycle. This is not luck. This is knowledge. This is understanding how the economic machine works. And here is what you need to understand about debt. It is like gravity. You can ignore it for a while. You can pretend it does not exist, but eventually it always pulls you down. These 5 states have been ignoring gravity for decades, and now the laws of economics are about to reassert themselves with brutal force. California, Illinois, New Jersey, Connecticut, and New York. Remember those names. These are not just random states I picked out of thin air. These are the 5 states with the most catastrophic combination of unfunded pension liabilities, declining tax bases, and political gridlock that makes solving the problem nearly impossible. Let me give you some numbers that should terrify anyone thinking about buying property in these places. California alone has over $1 trillion in unfunded pension liabilities. Think about that for a moment. 1 trillion. That is more than the entire GDP of most countries. And who do you think is going to pay for that? The taxpayers, the homeowners, people like you. Illinois is even worse when you look at it per capita. They have promised benefits they simply cannot afford to pay. And unlike the federal government, states cannot print money. They only have 3 options: cut services, raise taxes, or default on their obligations. None of those options are good for property values. But here is where it gets really interesting. Most people think that real estate prices are determined by supply and demand, by interest rates, by the local job market. And yes, those factors matter. But there is a deeper force at work that almost nobody talks about: confidence. Property values are ultimately built on confidence. Confidence that the state will maintain infrastructure. Confidence that schools will remain good. Confidence that police and fire services will keep you safe. Confidence that your taxes will not skyrocket. When that confidence breaks, and I mean really breaks, property values do not just decline gradually. They collapse suddenly. I saw this happen in Detroit. I saw it happen in parts of Greece during their debt crisis. And I am seeing the exact same warning signs flashing red in these 5 states right now. Think about it like this. You know how a company can look fine on the surface. The stock price is holding steady. Analysts are saying everything is okay. And then suddenly one day it all falls apart. That is because confidence is binary. It is either there or it is not. And once it is gone, it is almost impossible to get back. The same thing happens with states and cities. People start noticing that the roads are not getting fixed, that the schools are cutting teachers, that response times for emergency services are getting longer, that taxes keep creeping up while services keep declining. And one by one, people who have options start leaving. First, it is just a trickle. A few wealthy families move to Florida or Texas. A few businesses relocate their headquarters. But then the trickle becomes a stream. And the stream becomes a flood. And suddenly the state is caught in a death spiral. The people leaving are the high earners, the ones paying the most taxes, which means less revenue, which means more cuts or higher taxes on those who remain, which drives even more people to leave. You can see this pattern playing out right now if you know where to look. Census data shows it clearly. People are voting with their feet, moving from high tax, high debt states to low tax, financially stable states. This is not a political statement. This is an economic reality. And here is the part that really matters for you. When you buy a house, you are not just buying a building. You are buying into a 30-year contract with that state and local government. You are betting that they will manage their finances responsibly, that they will not massively increase your property taxes, that they will maintain the quality of life that made you want to live there in the first place. In these 5 states, that bet is looking worse every single day. Now, I can already hear some of you thinking, but what about all the opportunities in these places? What about the jobs, the culture, the lifestyle? And yes, those things matter. I am not telling you to never set foot in California or New York. What I am telling you is that buying property there in 2026 is financial suicide. There is a massive difference between living somewhere and owning property there. You can rent in Manhattan and enjoy everything the city has to offer without tying yourself to its financial anchor. You can work in San Francisco without betting your life savings on a market that is about to correct dramatically. The wealthy understand this distinction. They rent in expensive cities and own property in places with strong fundamentals. They follow opportunity, but they invest based on cold, hard economic reality. Let me share with you a principle that has served me well throughout my entire career. Never confuse what you want to be true with what is actually true. This is perhaps the hardest lesson for most people to learn because we are emotional creatures. We fall in love with a neighborhood, with a view, with a dream of what our life could be in a particular place. And that emotion clouds our judgment. I have seen incredibly intelligent people, doctors, lawyers, engineers, make catastrophic financial decisions because they let emotion override logic. They wanted that house in that specific location so badly that they ignored every warning sign. They convinced themselves that somehow the rules of economics would not apply to them. But economics does not care about your dreams. It does not care about your emotions. It operates according to principles that are as reliable as the laws of physics. And one of those principles is this: debt that cannot be repaid will not be repaid. It is that simple. These 5 states have accumulated debts and obligations that cannot possibly be honored in full. Something has to give, and when it does, the people holding property in those states are going to be the ones who pay the price. Now let me tell you about a different kind of opportunity, because I promised you this would not just be doom and gloom. While some states are drowning in debt, others are thriving. States like Tennessee, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, and Arizona have been managing their finances responsibly. They have been attracting businesses and talented people. They have been building for the future instead of mortgaging it. When you buy property in a financially stable state, you are not just buying a house. You are buying into competent management. You are buying into a government that lives within its means. You are buying into a future that looks brighter, not darker. And here is the beautiful irony. Because so many people are still clinging to the old status symbols, still believing that you have to live in California or New York to be successful, property in these financially stable states is still relatively affordable. The opportunity is still there. But that window is closing fast. Think about what happened after the pandemic. Millions of people suddenly realized they could work remotely. And what did they do? They fled the high tax, high-cost states and moved to places like Austin, Nashville, and Miami. Property values in those cities exploded because demand surged while the fundamentals were solid. That migration is not over. In fact, it is about to accelerate because as these debt problems become more visible, as taxes rise and services decline in these 5 troubled states, even more people are going to leave, and they are going to take their wealth with them. This is a massive wealth transfer that is happening right before our eyes. Trillions of dollars are going to flow from poorly managed states to well-managed states over the next decade. The question is, are you going to be on the right side of that transfer or the wrong side? Let me give you a framework for thinking about this. Whenever you are considering a major financial decision, ask yourself 3 questions. First, what are the fundamentals? Not what do I hope will happen, but what does the data actually show? Second, what is the trend? Is the situation improving or deteriorating? And third, what is my margin of safety? What happens if things go wrong? When you apply this framework to buying property in California, Illinois, New Jersey, Connecticut, or New York in 2026, the answer should terrify you. The fundamentals are terrible: massive debt, unfunded obligations, declining population among high earners. The trend is deteriorating. These problems are getting worse, not better, and your margin of safety is non-existent. If things go wrong, you are trapped. Compare that to buying property in a state with low debt, growing population, business-friendly policies, and competent fiscal management. The fundamentals are strong. The trend is positive, and you have a real margin of safety because even if there is a broader economic downturn, you are in a place that is positioned to weather the storm. This is not complicated, but it does require you to set aside emotion and look at reality clearly. I want to end this section with a story that I think captures everything I have been trying to tell you. A few years ago, I met a couple in their 50s who had worked hard their whole lives. They had saved diligently. They were finally ready to buy their dream retirement home, and they had fallen in love with a property in coastal Connecticut. Beautiful views, charming town, everything they had ever wanted. They asked for my advice, and I told them exactly what I am telling you now. I showed them the numbers, the pension obligations, the tax trends, the demographic shifts. I explained that buying that property was a bet against economic gravity. But they did not want to hear it. They bought the house anyway. And for the first 2 years, everything seemed fine. They loved their life there. They told themselves I had been wrong. Then the bills started coming. Property taxes up 20%, then 30%, services cut. The charming downtown started looking shabby because the town could not afford maintenance. Their home value started declining. And now, 5 years later, they are desperately trying to sell at a massive loss so they can escape before it gets even worse. That story breaks my heart because it did not have to happen. They had the information. They just chose to ignore it. Do not make that same mistake. The truth is, most people approach the biggest financial decision of their lives with less research than they would give to buying a new car. They walk through a house, they imagine their furniture in the rooms, they picture their children playing in the garden, and they make an emotional decision worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. Then they spend the next 30 years paying for that emotion. But you have the chance to be different. You have the chance to make a decision based on knowledge instead of hope. And that knowledge starts with understanding one fundamental truth about how wealth actually works. Wealth is not built by following the crowd. It is built by seeing what others refuse to see and acting on it before the masses catch up. When everyone thought the internet was a fad, a few people saw the future and became billionaires. When everyone thought real estate only goes up, a few people saw the crisis coming in 2008 and positioned themselves to profit from it. Right now, everyone still believes that property in these 5 states is safe because it has always been valuable. They believe in the brand. California is glamorous. New York is powerful. These places have been desirable for so long that people cannot imagine that changing. But brands fade when the substance behind them disappears. Look at what happened to Detroit, once the most prosperous city in America, the arsenal of democracy. People thought property there would always be valuable because of what Detroit represented. But when the fundamentals collapsed, so did everything else. Beautiful homes that once sold for hundreds of thousands became worthless, and it happened faster than anyone thought possible. I am not saying that San Francisco or Manhattan will become Detroit. These are different situations with different dynamics. What I am saying is that the principle is the same. When debt becomes unsustainable and confidence breaks, property values can fall much further and faster than anyone thinks possible. And the tragedy is that the people who will suffer most are not the wealthy. The truly wealthy are already diversifying out of these states. They are buying property in Wyoming and Montana, in Texas and Florida. They are spreading their risk. They understand that concentration is dangerous. No, the people who will suffer are the middle-class families who put everything they have into one property because they believed it was the safe thing to do. They believed the conventional wisdom, and they are going to learn a very expensive lesson about the difference between conventional wisdom and actual wisdom. Here is another principle that the wealthy understand. Liquidity is a form of wealth in itself. When you tie up all your capital in an illiquid asset like property, especially in a declining market, you lose the ability to adapt. You lose optionality. And optionality is incredibly valuable in uncertain times. Think about 2 people, both with £200,000 to invest. Person A uses it all as a deposit on a house in one of these 5 troubled states. Person B keeps half in liquid investments and uses the other half more conservatively. When the crisis hits, Person A is stuck. They cannot sell without taking a massive loss. They cannot move for a better job opportunity. They are paralyzed. Person B can adapt. They can wait for better opportunities. They can move if they need to. They have options, and in a changing world, options are priceless. This is why I keep emphasizing that renting is not throwing money away in certain situations. Renting is buying flexibility. It is buying the option to move quickly when circumstances change. And right now, in these 5 states, that flexibility is worth far more than most people realize. But let me be absolutely clear about something. I am not against home ownership. I am not saying you should never buy property. What I am saying is that timing and location matter enormously. Buying the right property in the right place at the right time is one of the best investments you can make. But buying the wrong property in the wrong place at the wrong time can destroy your financial future. And 2026 in these 5 states is absolutely the wrong time. You see, we are at a unique moment in history. Interest rates have been manipulated for so long that many people have forgotten what normal looks like. Asset prices have been inflated by cheap money for over a decade, and now that era is ending. The punch bowl is being taken away, and when it is, we are going to see who has been swimming naked. To borrow a phrase from Warren Buffett, these 5 states are swimming naked. Their debt was manageable when interest rates were near zero and tax revenues were flowing in. But now they have to refinance that debt at much higher rates, and their tax revenues are declining as people and businesses leave. It is a perfect storm, and it is going to hit in 2026 with full force. I want you to imagine watching this unfold from two different positions. Position one, you own property in one of these states. Every news story about rising debt, every announcement of tax increases, every report of people leaving makes your stomach turn. Your largest asset is declining in value, and there is nothing you can do about it. You lie awake at night worrying about whether you will ever be able to sell, whether you will be trapped there forever. Position two, you saw this coming, you positioned yourself in a stable state or you stayed liquid. You watch the same news stories with calm understanding. You even start looking at opportunities, knowing that crisis creates bargains. You sleep peacefully because you made decisions based on reality, not emotion. Which position do you want to be in? The answer should be obvious, yet I know that many people watching this will still convince themselves that somehow they will be the exception. That somehow the problems I am describing will not affect them. This is human nature. We are optimistic creatures. We want to believe the best. And that optimism, while beautiful in many contexts, can be absolutely devastating when it comes to major financial decisions. Let me tell you what is going to happen over the next few years, and I want you to listen carefully because this is not speculation. This is pattern recognition based on decades of studying economic cycles across different countries and time periods. First, the denial phase. Right now, most people in these 5 states are in denial. They see the warning signs, but they explain them away. They tell themselves that their city is different, that their neighborhood will be fine, that the government will figure something out. This phase feels comfortable because nothing has really changed yet on the surface. Then comes the recognition phase. This is when the problems become too obvious to ignore. When property taxes jump dramatically in a single year. When a major employer announces they are relocating to Texas. When the local news starts running stories about the pension crisis. When you try to sell your home and discover there are no buyers at anywhere near the price you expected. This phase is marked by anxiety and the first hints of panic. Next is the panic phase. This is when everyone tries to exit at once. When the market becomes flooded with properties and prices fall off a cliff. When the local estate agents stop returning your calls because they have 50 other desperate sellers just like you. When you realize that you are not just losing your profit, you are losing your deposit, possibly even facing negative equity. Finally, the acceptance phase. This is when prices stabilize at their new, much lower level. When people accept the new reality. When some brave souls start buying again at bargain prices. But by this point, if you bought at the peak, you have lost years of your life and possibly your entire life savings. I have watched this cycle play out in Japan, in Spain, in Greece, in parts of America after 2008. It always follows the same pattern, and it always feels different to the people living through it. They always think their situation is unique, but it never is. The mathematics of debt are universal. When you owe more than you can pay, eventually something breaks. For countries, that might mean currency collapse or default. For states, it means service cuts, tax increases, and economic decline. And for homeowners in those states, it means wealth destruction on a scale that most cannot imagine. Now, some of you might be thinking, what about the government? Will they not bail these states out? And this is where we need to have an honest conversation about political and economic reality. The federal government is itself drowning in debt. They have their own problems. And politically, do you really think taxpayers in well-managed states like Texas and Florida are going to agree to bail out states that have been fiscally irresponsible for decades? Do you think people who left California specifically to escape high taxes are going to vote for politicians who want to use their money to rescue California. It is not going to happen, or if it does happen, it will be too little, too late, and it will come with strings attached that make the situation even worse. This is why you cannot wait for someone else to solve this problem. You have to take responsibility for your own financial future. You have to make decisions based on what is likely to happen, not on what you hope might happen. And here is what is likely to happen. These 5 states are going to experience a prolonged period of economic decline. Some cities within these states will fare better than others. Some neighborhoods will hold value better than others. But the overall trend is clear and it is negative. Meanwhile, states that have been managing their finances responsibly are going to thrive. They are going to attract the businesses, the talented workers, the wealth that is fleeing the troubled states. They are going to invest in infrastructure and schools and services because they can afford to. And property values there are going to rise as demand increases. This is not prophecy. This is simply understanding cause and effect. Good policy leads to good outcomes. Bad policy leads to bad outcomes. And we are about to see that play out on a massive scale. So what should you do with this information? Let me give you a clear action plan. First, if you are currently renting in one of these 5 states and thinking about buying, do not do it. Stay flexible. Wait, watch. Let this play out. Yes, you will face social pressure. Your parents will tell you that you are throwing money away on rent. Your friends will show off their new homes on social media. Ignore all of it. You are not throwing money away. You are buying insurance against a catastrophe. Second, if you already own property in one of these states, you need to seriously consider your options. I know this is painful. I know you do not want to hear it, but sometimes the best decision is to take a small loss now rather than a catastrophic loss later. Look at your situation honestly. Can you afford to stay if property taxes double? What happens to your equity if values drop 30 or 40%? Do you have a plan, or are you just hoping for the best? Third, if you are looking to buy property anywhere, do your homework. Look at state finances. Look at pension obligations. Look at population trends. Look at tax policies. Buy in places with strong fundamentals, not strong marketing. Buy where the wealthy are moving to, not where they are leaving from. And fourth, diversify. Do not put all your wealth into one asset in one location. Spread your risk. Keep some liquidity. Maintain flexibility. The future is uncertain, and flexibility is how you survive and thrive in uncertainty. I know some of this sounds harsh. I know it goes against everything you have been told about the property ladder and building wealth through home ownership. But I need you to understand something crucial. The rules have changed. The world that your parents and grandparents bought property in no longer exists. Back then, states were not carrying trillion-pound pension obligations. Back then, people could not work remotely from anywhere. Back then, there was not this level of mobility where entire companies could relocate across the country in a matter of months. The game has fundamentally changed, and if you are still playing by the old rules, you are going to lose. Let me paint you a picture of what success looks like in this new environment. Imagine a young professional couple. They both work in tech and can work remotely. They have been living in San Francisco, paying extortionate rent, but they have been saving aggressively. All their friends are buying flats in the Bay Area, taking on massive mortgages, convinced that California property always goes up. But this couple does their research. They look at the numbers we have been discussing. They see the writing on the wall, so they make a different choice. They move to Austin. They rent for a year to learn the area. They keep their savings liquid. They watch as their friends back in California start complaining about rising property taxes and falling home values. Then, when the market corrects, when reality finally catches up with California, they are ready. They buy a beautiful home in Austin for half what they would have paid 2 years earlier. They have no regrets. They did not panic. They did not follow the crowd. They understood the cycle and they positioned themselves accordingly. That couple is going to build generational wealth. Their friends who bought at the peak in California are going to spend the next decade trying to recover from a decision they made in a moment of fear and social pressure. This is the difference between financial intelligence and financial ignorance. And I am telling you this because I want you to be on the winning side of this equation. Now, let me address something that I know is in the back of many of your minds. You are thinking, what if you are wrong? What if these states find a way to solve their problems? What if property values keep rising despite everything? This is a fair question, and it deserves a thoughtful answer. Could I be wrong? Of course. Anyone who tells you they can predict the future with certainty is lying to you. But here is the key. I am not asking you to bet on my being right. I am asking you to look at the risk and reward ratio. If I am wrong and you did not buy in these states, what have you lost? You rented for a few more years. You kept your savings liquid. You maintained flexibility. Maybe you missed out on some appreciation. That is the downside. But if I am right and you did buy in these states, what have you lost? Potentially everything. Your deposit, your equity, years of your life trapped in a depreciating asset, the opportunity cost of having your capital locked up in something that is destroying value rather than creating it. That is the downside, when the potential downside is catastrophic and the upside is modest at best. The smart money stays away. This is basic risk management. This is how you protect wealth over the long term. And let me be clear about something else. Even if these states do somehow muddle through, even if they raise taxes enough to cover their obligations without complete economic collapse, that is still a terrible outcome for property owners, because high taxes and declining services still lead to population loss and falling property values. You do not need a complete crisis to lose money. A slow grinding decline is just as destructive, it just takes longer. So either way, whether we get the crisis I am predicting or just a prolonged period of managed decline, buying property in these 5 states in 2026 is a losing proposition. Think about it like this. You are standing at a crossroads. One path is well lit and clearly marked. You can see where it leads. It might not be the most exciting path, but it is safe and it gets you where you want to go. The other path disappears into fog. Maybe there is treasure at the end. Maybe there is a cliff. You simply cannot see. Buying property in California, Illinois, New Jersey, Connecticut, or New York in 2026 is choosing the foggy path. You are gambling with the biggest financial decision of your life on hope rather than evidence. Why would you do that when there are so many better options available? I started this by asking you if you were certain that your financial decisions were the right ones. Now I want to ask you a different question. Are you willing to make a decision today that your future self will thank you for? Are you willing to be contrarian, to ignore social pressure, to trust data over emotion? Because that is what this comes down to. Not complicated financial models or economic theories. Just simple courage. The courage to see reality clearly and act on it, even when it is uncomfortable. The wealthy have this courage. They make decisions that seem strange to others because they are looking 3 moves ahead, while everyone else is focused on the next move. They sell when everyone is buying. They buy when everyone is selling. They position themselves based on what is coming, not what has already happened. You can develop this same mindset. It starts with education, with understanding how the economic machine works, with learning to separate signal from noise, with asking better questions. Do not ask whether you can afford the mortgage payment. Ask whether the state can afford its obligations. Do not ask whether the neighborhood is nice today. Ask whether it will still be nice in 10 years given the fiscal trajectory. Do not ask what your friends are doing. Ask what the data is telling you. These are the questions that lead to wealth. These are the questions that protect you from disaster. And here is the final thing I want you to understand before we finish. This is not just about avoiding one bad decision. This is about developing a framework for making better decisions for the rest of your life. Once you learn to think this way, once you learn to see through the noise and focus on fundamentals, you will make better choices about everything. Your career, your investments, your business ventures. Financial intelligence is not about knowing secret tricks or insider information. It is about understanding principles and having the discipline to apply them even when it is difficult. The principle here is simple. Debt matters. Fundamentals matter. Trends matter. And when all three are pointing in the wrong direction, you stay away no matter how attractive the surface appears. Remember this moment. Remember what you learned here today. And when 2027 comes and the headlines are screaming about the crisis in these 5 states, about plummeting property values and soaring taxes, you will know that you saw it coming. You will know that you made the right choice, and that knowledge will give you the confidence to trust your judgment on the next big decision and the one after that. This is how wealth is built, not through luck, not through timing the market perfectly, but through consistently making sound decisions based on reality rather than hope. One good decision at a time, compounded over years and decades. You now have the information you need. The question is, what will you do with it?